Englishman Johnny Butterworth, 9'9 1/4", enters the West Melbourne Stadium ring for his 12-round bout against George Bracken of Geelong, who weighed 9'9 3/4". Bracken, Australia's leading lightweight, setting out on a campaign to regain the national lightweight title. The Australian back in the ring after several months' inactivity owing to a persistent shoulder injury. This was to be one of Bracken's most important fights, as he needed a win to justify bouts with top-rating overseas fighters shortly to arrive in Australia. The boxing was fairly light in the early stages of round one. Bracken and Butterworth moved around, sparring cautiously, each feeling for range. Bracken was boxing at his best, and when Butterworth went back to his corner, there was a trickle of blood coming from the edge of his right eye. The points of the opening round were in Bracken's favour, clearly, and he came up for round two full of confidence. In the interval, Butterworth's seconds had worked over his right eye injury, and it seemed to be all right as he bored in to open the attack. It was not long, however, before the eye was bleeding freely again. Bracken, plainly the better boxer at this stage, was piercing Butterworth's defence with accurately timed and placed left hooks. There with the closely cropped hair. Left of the picture. With his eye patched up again, Butterworth came out for round three, and the rough, tough lad from Lancashire came in lustily, boring bull-headed through Bracken's stinging lefts. At this stage, the Englishman was taking a considerable amount of punishment from Bracken's classically correct left hooks. It seemed as though the fight was going Bracken's way. His left hooking was splendid, he was boxing coolly and correctly. No time in the round was he in trouble from Butterworth's heavier, but not nearly so well-directed two-handed hitting. On the other hand, Butterworth's right eye seemed to be in a bad way. Many wondered how long it would be before referee Terry Riley took notice of the trouble. Was an object lesson in coolness, cleverness and speed. His blocking, weaving and head moving were making Butterworth's best miss time and time again. So much did Butterworth's doggedly courageous fighting appeal to the crowd that there were cheers for every punch he landed, despite the fact that when round 5 started, Bracken was a hot favourite, and rightly so. Never further away from Bracken than half-arm distance, Butterworth hurled punches persistently. There could not have been a more gallant triumph that Bracken at this stage was boxing beautifully in both attack and defence. Comes out back to centre ring. Bracken had a big lead at this stage, but it was clear that if he maintained the boxing skill and speed that had been such wonderful assets to him from the start, the decision would go his way. But it was noticeable throughout round 6 that Bracken wasn't fighting nearly as aggressively as his rugged and quite evidently superbly fit opponent. Bracken's long left hooks were still accurate, but they seemed to have lost their sting. At any rate, they weren't holding Butterworth 1 inch. Actually, Bracken's best punches now were his countering rights to the ribs and the face. Butterworth took plenty of these throughout the round without slackening the pace of his attack for a second. Near the end of the round, Butterworth's heavy right to the face drove Bracken back against the ropes. He came back fighting hard, and they were still swapping punches after the bell sounded. Fighters these days don't come shrewder than Johnny Butterworth, and it can be taken as certain that as he sat in his corner between rounds 6 and 7, he sensed that the sharp edge was leaving Bracken's fighting face. At any rate, the Englishman rushed into the fight with increased ferocity as round 7 opened. It was Butterworth who was doing the bulk of the leading. Incessantly he carried the fight to Bracken. There wasn't much in the way of science in his methods. Frequently his lusty rights missed by feet. His eye was bleeding again, but Bracken's right eye also had sustained a cut during the hectic 6th round. Butterworth had won his second round by the time the 8th was over. Bracken had won the first 5 with the 6th even. The question was whether he could whittle down Bracken's still substantial lead. To do that, Butterworth would have to win every round from the 9th on. Butterworth hadn't been in action more than half a minute in round 9 before it became clear that he was dictating the pattern of the battle. The 9th went to the Englishman, as did the 10th. Again it was Butterworth who grasped the initiative and made the fight right through round 11. At times, Bracken wasn't boxing with any greater sting than he would have in a gymnasium spar, and he was almost constantly on the retreat from Butterworth's heavy artillery. The crowd was on its feet yelling encouragement to each boxer. It had been a grand bout right from the start, and the issue was still in doubt. Butterworth stalking Bracken to the 4 corners of the ring. Everything depended on round 12, the final round. Butterworth had made up his leeway. The decision now rested on the result of this round. Butterworth was first to score with a weighty right to the head. A right to the body stopped Bracken in his tracks. A left to the head and right to the body drove him back again. The dogged Englishman, walking up persistently, never gave the back-moving Bracken a moment's respite. In the exchanges, Bracken was always the first to break ground. Maintaining the speed and persistence of punching that had been the pattern of his attack throughout, Butterworth fought his way to the front and stayed there. Bracken's ring condition was not all it should have been. When the pressure was on, the Australian boy showed he would have been all the better for another fight before meeting so tough and courageous an opponent as Butterworth. Continued to the end. Without hesitation, referee Terry Riley crowned Butterworth. His decision was correct. Some thought a draw would have been fairer, but Butterworth clearly had won the last round, and nothing more was needed to give him victory.